March 4th, 1996, my sobriety date. I got sober and I started growing from the inside out. Got more dysfunctional. I just see so much dysfunction in the CEO suite or the C-suite in general. It's getting worse, not better. This person is absolutely a raving narcissist and is destroying the culture of the company and beating up the executive team in the worst way. But the numbers are performing on Wall Street, and so the board is not intervening. So I see a lot of public companies turning the other way on culture. They don't really care as much. What they care about is bottom line results. You don't realize how much of a difficult time it is starting a new role. The company knows they've got to promote them. They want to be promoted, and they're being promoted to their highest level of incompetence. We call it the Peter principle. Until that person you just hired has been there for a year, you haven't finished your job.
Welcome to the Executive Connect podcast. Today, I'm honored and so grateful to have my friend and mentor, Daniel Mueller, to talk with us today. He is a pioneer for high-performing CEOs and one of the best executive coaches I know. He's been teaching and mentoring people since 1987, and he's developed and mentored so many of the top executives in Austin, Texas. So welcome, Daniel, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Melissa. Good to see you.
Daniel, executive coaching, you've been doing it for a very long time with some of the best leaders in the industry. Let's talk a little bit about how that journey has been and how you got into executive coaching.
Yeah, sure. So in the early 80s, I was an organizational development consultant, a management consultant doing change management in the middle market. And I met a guy named John Paget, who was CEO of Interlogic Trace in San Antonio, and he was running a 2,000 employee company. John was doing a RIF, RIF, reduction in force. And he was riffing about 50% of the employees. They were going through a very hard time. My firm was in there helping with the RIF. And John put himself in the RIF. In other words, he fired himself. And he came to me and said, Daniel, I want you to be my coach. And I said, what's that? And he said, well, this is what coaches do. And I said, well, John, I'm not that. I don't have a PhD in psychology, and I don't fix problem children, in the executive suite, because that's basically what coaching was at the time. An industrial psychologist doing psychotherapy for dysfunctional executives in the Fortune 500. So that's where executive coaching came from. And so I said, John, I don't do that, but I am a writer and you need a resume, so I'll write your resume for you. And so I did his resume, and then I helped him with networking. He ended up working for a company called Access as CEO. And then General Electric and Jack Welch came in and bought the company. He ended up being a direct report to Jack Welch. He took me with him to that deal. And then he went to Cinex, where he was president, $6 billion company in the Valley. And I helped him there. And so he brought me with him everywhere he went. And he was a big networker, very well connected in the tech space, and introduced me to a lot of other CEOs. And I had this meteoric ride to the top of CEO coaching from 1987 to 1996. And then in 96, I crashed and burned. And there was a big disconnect between the outside Daniel that you saw, which is Mr. CEO coach, right? And the inside, the scared little kid from Jersey who doesn't have a college degree, who doesn't have a PhD in organizational design and development or psychology, and was making this huge amount of money doing this work. And so I solved the problem of that disconnect by drinking. And I was always a budding alcoholic, but then by that point, I was a full-blown alcoholic. So March 4th, 1996, my sobriety date, I got sober. and I started growing from the inside out. So I actually started taking my own medicine and working on myself in a little city called Austin, Texas. Right at that time was the internet boom. So 1996, 97, 98, I have this little office in Austin, Texas, and the VCs discover me. Austin Ventures and all the VCs start sending me their CEOs to coach. And so I had 10 sessions a day, 5 days a week of all these CEOs in Austin, Texas. But then the bubble burst, and that was around 2002, 2003. And then all of the top executives left Austin, went around the country, and I was back out on the road, Mr. CEO coach again, this time bigger, better, but also from the inside out. I was right with myself, and I was right with the world. So that's how I became an executive coach, and that's my story of kind of the rise, the fall, and the recovery of this coach.
Ready to lead smarter and invest wiser? On the Executive Connect podcast, we unpack executive strategies for wealth and influence. Hit the subscribe button now. Don't just watch, act.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And thank you for all you do. Now, you've coached 2,000 plus people and 50,000 hours of coaching hours, like you said, to some of the best CEOs. What, from your perspective, with all that time, what are some of the significant shifts you've seen in CEOs today versus back when you first got started?
Oh, my goodness. Melissa, they've gotten more dysfunctional. I just see so much dysfunction in the CEO suite or the C-suite in general, and it's getting worse, not better. I think there's a number of reasons for it, but the point is that there's a lot of dysfunction out there, and I have horror story after horror story. I coach the number 2 person at a Fortune 50 company, and this person tells me the war stories about this person's boss. And I'm not going to name names. And it is absolute narcissistic personality disorder on steroids. This person is absolutely a raving narcissist and is destroying the culture of the company and beating up the executive team in the worst way. But the numbers are performing on Wall Street, and so the board is not intervening. And life goes on. So I see a lot of public companies turning the other way on culture. They don't really care as much. What they care about is bottom line results. What does Wall Street say? Private equity, the same thing. They're caring more about the numbers and the performance of the company and less about the people. And in the VC world, it's the same story. So we're just not indexing enough on people and culture, and we're over-indexing on performance, and that eventually doesn't scale.
Are you a high-income professional looking for smarter ways to protect your wealth? The Texas Freedom Fund gives you the opportunity to invest in energy assets leveraging proven fracking technology and prime access to global markets. With strategic oil and gas investments, you can build real wealth while benefiting from tax advantages under laws dating back to the Reagan era. Take control of your financial future. Visit texasfreedomfund.executiveconnectpodcast.com.
Yeah, and it seems to me that there's a mass amount of turnover. I feel like in the last few years, the turnover for not just CEOs but top executives, it's a year or 2 years, and they're looking for a new job, and then they find the new job, and then it's a year or 6 months. And I know you wrote a book about this on how to properly get started in your new job. I want to maybe share, if you could, a little bit about some of the nuggets we could find in that book.
Sure. Well, the backstory on the book is that I used to have 2 buckets of work that I did. One bucket was career coaching, which we talked about, right? Helping somebody get a job. And so the other bucket, leadership coaching, helping somebody grow in the job. So I had those two buckets for years. But what I noticed is that when I helped somebody get a job, they would immediately get consumed with their role and say, Daniel, I don't have time for coaching anymore. I'll call you in 6 months. And then I would be re-engaged in 6 months, and I would just hear horror story after horror story of what happened during those 6 months if they lasted during that time. And so I thought, there is a middle ground here. There's a place for onboarding. So I started researching, and what I found is that the vast majority of the books out there on onboarding, how to start a new job, they all focus on the first 3 months. Those first 3 months are the honeymoon period, though. So generally, things go really well during those first 3 months. It's the second quarter, the third quarter, the fourth quarter where you see a lot of bad things happen. So I wrote this book, and it's called The Art of Your Start, and it's coming out to the public in a few months. But basically, it's how to start a new leadership role, and it takes you through the first year. So it's a playbook for 3 things: onboarding, that first couple of months, and then assimilation, how to assimilate into the organization effectively, and the third, integration, to be fully integrated. So the point is that until you're there for a year, you really haven't done that complete job of starting your new role. And the message to managers and leaders, executives is this as well. Until that person you just hired has been there for a year, you haven't finished your job. And the stats are this: 20 to 25% are fired and quit within their first year of the director level and above. 20 to 25%. You don't realize how much of a difficult time it is starting a new role. It's not business as usual. It's counterintuitive, and it's not something that most people know how to do, because you don't start that many jobs in your lifetime.
Yeah. And why do you think that is? What's the shift on why these numbers are increasing? Is there a reason or something you could point your finger to?
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons. Number one is that the baby boomer phenomenon, we have a tremendous number of executives, leaders, managers retiring. 10,000 a day is what I've heard. 10,000 people leaving the workforce a day. But anyway, whatever the numbers are, it's a huge number of baby boomers stepping out. And we have this next generation of leaders coming up through the ranks. They're moving faster. They're more aggressive with their career plan. They want to move faster. They want higher level roles in shorter periods of time, or they're going to check out and they're going to go someplace else. So there's that phenomenon. The company knows they've got to promote them. They want to be promoted, and they're being promoted to their highest level of incompetence. We call it the Peter principle. And so they're not ready for that next level up leadership role. But they're getting it, and they're not being as successful as they need to be. So that's one reason.
So, is your advice that they should kind of sit in that role, get a year under their belt, bump their knees up a little bit and learn, and then kind of take the next step, or lean into the role but get mentors in a support system around them that can help them navigate, the twists and turns in the role?
Yeah. So I've been saying for years, literally 38 years of doing this, that executive coaching is about to explode, and it's going to be everywhere. And soon it's not who is, do you have a coach, but who is your coach, right? So everyone is going to have a coach, right? Wrong. The vast majority of my clients still to this day have never had an executive coach. So yes, I believe in executive coaching. It works. I believe it's the best way to develop the director to senior director, the senior director to VP, VP to SVP, SVP to C-suite, C-suite to CEO. The very, very best way for numerous reasons. But
And sorry.
most people haven't ever had one.
And that's just baffling to me. I'm so shocked. I mean, if I'm gonna, get in shape or make a very important decision in my life, I want someone that has the knowledge and the experience to coach me to get there. So for me, I've been blessed and privileged with great mentors like yourself to get me places where I need to get. And it's been second nature to me to get coaching, but it also seems to me that everybody's in the coaching business now. Everybody's coaching. And I always say, like, free information is not always great information. And so I want to talk a little bit about, finding the right coach, because the one thing I love about coaching, Daniel, is that somebody's holding you accountable. So a lot of times, if you're setting out in January to go to the gym and get in shape, and by February you quit, if you don't have a coach, nobody's asking you, why didn't you show up and going and working with you on your goals, right?
Yeah, and it's a hot topic for me. So, so executive coaching is way different than coaching. So coaching, everybody is coming out with, they're a life coach, they're a fitness coach, they're this or that coach, right? An executive coach is a very unique animal. And to be an executive coach, I really believe you have needed to have been an executive to be effective, to really understand that executive mindset. Now, for me, I wasn't. It's too late. I'm kind of grandfathered in, right? But the best executives today, best executive coaches today are really former executives. However, that's not good enough either. So you need behavioral science methodology to help with cognitive reframing, behavioral modifications. So there's psychology involved, right? And then there's executive functionality involved. And then there's other things that really make the best executive coach. So the vast majority of executive coaches out there don't fit that criteria. And then 99% of all the coaches out there are not executive coaches. So you really have to make a distinction. Number one, it's not about having a coach. It's about having an executive coach. Number two, it is your coach meeting a certain set of criteria. Are they trained in the behavioral sciences? Are they a former executive? And then do they have the certifications and the knowledge of coaching methodology? All that said, I don't believe that that is sufficient, because my clientele will not stand for just me being an executive coach. They want more. They want an executive advisor. An executive advisor is one who gives advice. So give me some advice. Don't use coaching methodology and Socratic method when you have the answer and I don't, right? I've never fired anyone before. What should I do? Well, I could ask you 10 questions about it, or I could just give you the right answer of put them on a PIP, put them on a performance improvement plan, right? There are very distinct things that you do that are answers to the problems that you have as a leader or an executive, right? And this goes for any level leader, manager, senior manager, director level, second line managers, third line managers, right? So not just Socratic method, not just coaching per se, but also advising and then mentoring. So I mentor my clients as well. So I think that there's this holistic approach. So it's not just the executive functionality of performance in the business, but also that person's life, because you can gain great executive performance and lose your spouse, lose your family, lose your soul, become an alcoholic, and disintegrate. So I think it's a holistic need out there for the person, not just the executive or the leader, to get further in their career, but also further in their life. So mentoring and advising and coaching, and there's a few other things like cheerleading, like, is this coach somebody that you trust and is going to be positive and encouraging for you? So I believe in a couple of things. Number one, I believe that you should have some complimentary sessions with a coach. So as you're seeing, well, is this a good fit for me? I believe that every executive coach should give 3 complimentary coaching sessions. The vast majority do not. I always do. I always encourage people that are referred to me, try me out for a couple of sessions, and we'll try each other out actually and see if there's a good chemistry fit, because you have to be able to trust the person you're working with. But secondly, you also should ask some questions. How many clients have you had? Why? Because coaching is, or just this whole serving the leader in growth, let's call it that, right? Serving the leader in growing as a person, as a business leader. Well, it involves pattern recognition. So if you've been doing this for 2 years, you have limited pattern recognition. For me, 38 years, I have extreme pattern recognition. So as soon as somebody starts talking, it's like, okay, I've seen that movie. Boy, there's a playbook for that. Just like in football, right? There's called the 3-step button hook, right? 3 steps out, fake to the right, turn to the left, the ball's right there. It's a pattern. You run a pattern, and it's a proven pattern. Well, there are many, many proven patterns for leaders to take for performance management, for inspiring others, for influencing outcomes, et cetera, and having somebody that has seen a lot of patterns. So I think it's how much experience working with a specific population, and then also industry, right? Industry helps. So industry knowledge helps. Functional knowledge also helps. So if you're a salesperson, it might be better to have a coach that has background in sales. If you're a finance person, it might be better to have a coach that has a background in finance to be a bit of an advisor. So functional areas of expertise you're looking for pattern recognition, the number of reps, and then you're also looking for quantity of clients, and how many clients does somebody carry per year? Because people can talk a really good story about all the work that they do, and you find out, well, they carry 5 clients a year. And that's not giving you the pattern recognition, right? So I do anywhere from 40 to 60 clients a year. And I've done that for 38 years. And so after a while, you really see the same exact patterns, which brings me to AI, because you were really curious about AI, weren't you?
I was going to take you down that road, AI.
Yeah, so it's very interesting. AI is absolutely totally amazing. And I hate to say this, but I really could be replaced in some part, significant part, by ChatGPT. It's terrible to say, but really, I've been saying the same exact things over and over for 38 years. And you could easily have ChatGPT say those things to you. So for your audience, try this. Go into ChatGPT. ChatGPT, I want you to be an expert executive coach. I want you to have all of the skills and abilities of a top executive in the ABCGEFHIJ, really specify its space. And then tell ChatGPT to remember certain things. Remember, I'm currently a director of sales at a $50 million late stage VC backed company. Or I'm, the CFO of a $150 million private equity owned healthcare company, whatever. So inform ChatGPT and tell Chat to remember things about you. And then start coaching. Well, I've got this employee that's dysfunctional. They're refusing to do what I'm giving them to do, and they're giving me a really hard time. What should I do? Watch the answers. It's really amazing. You'll get incredible wisdom. And try that. But AI, yes, is absolutely totally amazing, and it's going to revolutionize our industry.
Yeah, I agree. I think AI is going to it changes all of our lives. And I know I always tell people, whether you like AI or you don't like AI, you need to understand how to use the tools and practice using them, because there's a lot of benefits, like you just mentioned, to using them. I want to, kind of pivoting off AI. I know, maybe I'm wrong here, but I feel like we're losing our emotional side of humans. You kind of touched on it a little bit at the beginning, where corporate is transactional. You need to do this. I need this by this date. Oh, you're only an employee for 6 months. Why aren't you selling millions of dollars in sales in 6 months? And so I've seen kind of this lack of emotional intelligence and self-awareness in the corporate world. I hear a lot about it, kind of some of the scary stories you were sharing, I've heard, and I'm like, no way this is happening. I want to talk a little bit about, emotional intelligence and self-awareness and understanding what that is to make you the best possible leader. I think a lot of times, like you were saying, those new employees go from director and they move up the chain, but if they've never managed people, right, they may be a good delivery person, but are they a good leader? And so I want to talk about some of the strategies that you help your leaders develop as they go up from director to VP to senior VP, and maybe how they become more self-aware.
Sure. Well, I think it's a great misnomer to think that if you're super smart, you're going to be a very effective leader. So smarts are twofold: intellectual smarts and emotional smarts. And oftentimes, the smarter somebody is intellectually, the weaker they are emotionally. So we have very, very smart people, because typically smart people figure out, well, gee, I'll make more money if I'm a manager than an individual contributor, right? And I'm not content just being an individual contributor. I want to be a manager. So they get promoted because they're smart. And then they get into that role and they say, well, that's okay, but there's more money at a second line manager role. Let me get promoted. And they do. But they haven't worked on their emotional intelligence. So they get themselves into trouble in that higher leadership roles where more and more emotional intelligence is required. So I think it is critical to for leaders to be balanced. But I'll say this, that everyone is on a continuum of these 4 areas I've identified, okay? So emotional intelligence is just one component. So you could be very, very emotionally intelligent and be terrible as a leader, right? So there's some very, very emotionally intelligent, say, therapists, right? They're great listeners, they're empathetic, whatever, but you'd never put them into a managerial role because they would crater. They don't have these other things. So execution, a drive, a passion for getting results. But just because you have a drive and a passion for getting results and you're emotionally intelligent doesn't mean you're going to be successful in the leadership world, because you need this other major category of competency, management. So management means performance management. It means controlling people and projects and directing and just that whole body of work that you would learn in an MBA program, right? But that still does not get you to being a great leader, because you need influencing skills. And there's a whole slew of those type of skills. So you really need to be a balanced person that has strong execution skills, strong relational skills, emotional intelligence, strong managerial abilities, and strong leadership and influencing skills. So if I left you with this idea that there's one phrase I've said more than any other phrase in 38 years of doing this, and this is profound, let me give it to you. A strength overused becomes a weakness. So we tend to overuse our strengths. We tend to overplay our strengths. So that person who is very emotionally intelligent, well, overdoing it, it becomes a real problem for them in the workplace. So even though it's very important, it's one component, I guess the message to you, it's one component of these 4 pillars, right? Somebody that's extremely good at execution, and they over execute, meaning they're just so driven to produce results, but they have dead people in their wake. And then there's some that are great at management and they over index on managing their people, and they're great managers, but they're not influential to their boss and their boss's boss, and they have limited impact because of it. So a strength overused becomes a weakness, and you just have to figure out where your strengths and weaknesses are. And there's a great book I'd suggest for your audience, and it's Strengths Finders. And Strengths Finders by Gallup. And if you get the full version, you pay $80 online, get the full version. It's 32 competencies, and it'll give you a very detailed report. And read your first 10, because that's where they give you a real thick paragraph of the explanation, your top strength, your second top strength. But then the last paragraph is overused. This tends to become XYZ. So then look at your top strengths and realize where you're overusing, because again, we tend to overplay our strengths.
Yeah, well said. I love that. I want to talk a little bit about resilience. I think one thing I've learned with executives is a resilience, and the ability to get back up on that horse when life happens is really key in the workplace. And so, you've openly shared a little bit about your personal journey and some of your challenges. You addressed them, you got back on that horse. So I want to talk a little bit about resilience in executive leadership as a CEO. We're all going to go through some difficult stuff in our life. I often find, Daniel, it's a mindset and it's an attitude. I want to get kind of your perspective on resilience and how it plays into the workforce today.
Yeah. Well, I would say this, that resilience is totally dependent on what you're relying on. So resilience depends upon reliance. To be resilient, you have to rely. You have to rely on something or someone. If you're only relying on yourself, that is a failed model. And so you have to rely on others. And we're in community. We're in community with each other. We're in community with some type of higher power. So I believe in a higher power. I believe that true resilience is relying on that higher power. And I call that higher power God. And I just think that resilience is dependent upon who you're relying on. So I think that those that are just, I'm going to pull myself up on my bootstraps and I'm just going to be resilient, I'm going to give up and it's all me, is a failed model. And it just doesn't scale.
That's great. I do think I think people are a key importance in having resilience and the lessons we learn along the way. I want to get kind of any final thoughts or anything that you want to share with our listeners that we didn't touch on.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I would say this. I do have a book that I'm promoting right now. It's called Executive Portfolio Life. It's on Amazon. It's the shortest book I've ever written. It's only 50 pages. It's an hour read, but it's the most profound little book for understanding where you're going when you're not going to work a full-time job anymore. So eventually we'll all get there. So I don't care if you're 30 years old listening to this podcast or 40 or 50, but eventually you're going to be at a place where you're not working a full-time gig anymore. And you're going to say, okay, now what do I do? So a couple of things. One, the book will help you to do that planning and it'll give you a vision for your future. Because the future for most leaders is not retirement. It's a bad idea. Why? Because most leaders are people that love performing, love getting things done, love accomplishing results. They just can't sit at home and watch Netflix or make a career out of putting a little tiny ball in a little tiny hole 450 yards away, right? So we've got to give back also, because that's the natural tendency. When we get to a place of seniority, the natural desire is to give back. So how do you do that? Well, I've identified 10 areas of give back. And I'll just give you one. The most common one for leaders who are stepping out of full-time gigs is sitting on boards. However, the most common question you're going to be asked once you look for a board seat is, how much board experience do you have? And so the time to get on boards is, say, in your late 40s and your 50s, not waiting to your 60s or 70s and saying, okay, I'm ready to sit on boards, because you don't have the board experience. Same thing with writing. Some people have this fantasy in their 30s and 40s. Well, someday I'm going to write a book. Well, you don't wait till you're 60 years old and you're no longer working a full-time gig to start writing. You should be writing for decades before that. So there's things to do to get ready for this portfolio life. And portfolio life is semi-retirement, if you will. So you're doing a number of different things to put together a rich life after full-time work. And I have more and more people today than ever before are stepping out of the full-time role earlier, in their late 40s, mid 50s, for whatever reasons, and going into this portfolio life of a diversified set of activities. So I do recommend the book, Executive Portfolio Life. It's on Amazon, and it just gives people vision, Melissa, for where they're going at some point in their future.
That's great. Definitely get that book. Follow Daniel on LinkedIn. I want to thank you so much for being here, sharing your time, your energy, and your passion for all things coaching. That is the Executive Connect podcast. Make sure you subscribe and follow us. Thank you so much, Daniel, for being here.
Thank you, Melissa.